Well, hello, fellows and Filettis. It's 4 a.m. here in San Diego. I cannot sleep. I think I took my Ritalin a little bit too late in the day. So I'm wide awake. I figured I might as well get some work done. And one of the things I wanted to do very much since I've seen the movie this weekend, uh, Suicide Squad, The Suicide Squad, is do a quick kind of thoughts review, whatever this is. I have to imagine if you're interested, you've already seen it, but I wanted to get my thoughts out. So, I'll tell you why in just a little bit why I can't stop thinking about it, right? There's an aspect of this movie that has really stuck with me. I watched it with my son a couple of days ago, and I it's not like it's on my mind constantly, but I most superhero movies, come in and out, you enjoy them, they're fun, you move on with your life. And you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. It's in the Marvel universe, and it adds this kind of elements to the tapestry of the big meta story, and so it matters, but it doesn't really stick with you. Like WandaVision stuck with me, right? Which I know is not a movie, but it's a superhero thing. Whereas you know, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, I enjoyed it, but it didn't really stick with me. Or Falcon and Winter Soldier, it was good, but it kind of went in and out. Suicide Squad's one of those movies that, superhero or not, I'm still thinking about a couple days after seeing it. And I'll tell you why in a second, but I want to give you the overall impressions first. The overall impression is I really liked this movie. I to the point that I'm actually kind of considering watching it again, which is something I very, very rarely do. Um, there's something about this movie that just feels special to me. It's certainly entertaining. It was never not entertaining. Um, but there was also just there's a heart to it. There's an essence, a message to it. There's more going on in this movie that than meets the eye, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But I really dug it. But here's some of the main things I liked about it. Um, it seemed to never, at least for me, it never stopped surprising me. And this covers the gambit. I mean, it was, and these are spoilers, so there'll be a lot of spoilers in this video, so just deal with it or don't watch it, obviously. It from the deaths of characters. Like, I haven't seen Deadpool 2. My understanding, people online are like, well, they did that in Deadpool 2. Maybe they did, but I hadn't seen it. Um, but the fact that the movie opens and within the first 3 minutes, 3 to 10 minutes, they're killing characters that have been advertised and would make you think that these are going to be main characters in the movie. I mean, Pete Davidson's character literally is the first to die, and he gets his face blown off in this delightful image of gore. And they just start dying. They just start dropping. And it is so refreshing to have characters in a movie. Some of them are, I think, are invented for the movie, but a lot of them are not. I mean, they kill Captain Boomerang, who's a major Flash villain. They kill Polka Dot Man. Oh my God, who's awesome in this movie. He dies in this movie. He's a real fucking. They didn't invent this guy for the movie, right? So it, it keeps you on your toes with the deaths from the very beginning until almost the end. You're like going, okay, this ain't like a normal superhero movie when Thanos shoots the missile at the Avengers compound and the whole thing explodes and every single one of them gets up out of the dirt and they're fine. People are dying left and right in this movie, people that you wouldn't expect. That kind of stuff is delightful. The movie plays linearly, but it jumps time whenever it wants to, right? And that's unexpected. So you're watching the film and it's not like Pulp Fiction that immediately is being told out of order, or it's not like a movie that starts to the end and then the most of the movie is a flashback and then it eventually catches up with itself. This is a movie that plays like a normal linear movie, and then suddenly all of a sudden it's like, oh hey, this thing happened 8 hours earlier, or this thing happened 6 minutes before what you just saw. And it's not all through the movie. It does it rarely. It does it like two or three times, but the frequency of it is enough and it's spread out enough that it really does keep you watching, and you don't know what to expect. That's one of this film's biggest strengths, is that it feels fresh and unique in a world of superhero movies that I think we've all, as much as I still love superhero movies, there is kind of a sameness that's happened. Like Shang-Chi, for example, coming out next week. I'm fine waiting for that to drop on video, or whatever, DVD, Netflix, whatever the fuck, Disney Plus. Not because it doesn't look good, but it just looks like, okay, I know what this is. I'm excited to see it later. But Suicide Squad really, or the Suicide Squad really is just like, you don't know what to expect. And in that, it's very cool and very engaging. Even like the characters, I mean, they're like, you know, the powers of like Polka Dot Man, who obviously is a joke, but his powers are no fucking joke. When you see what they do to people and you see the gore that they create, it's amazing. Ratcatcher 2 is obviously a stupid power, but she kicks ass with that power. There's a guy named TDK who's played by Nathan Fillion, whose ability he's invented for the movie, but there was a character like this in DC canon back in the day. He literally can will parts of his body to come off, and he attacks people with those body parts, like psychically. So he has his arms pop off, for example, and they go and they start beating people up, and he's safe, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50 yards away. It's just weird fucking shit you don't expect. And he dies, by the way. It's just weird fucking shit you don't expect. I love that. That's one of my favorite things about this movie. The other thing about this movie I love is the MacGuffin pays off. MacGuffin has become an overused term that I think Hitchcock coined, but the gist of it's like one of those things that's like, this is what the characters are chasing. You know, it was the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. It was the Ark in Raiders. It's the thing that kind of sets the plot in motion, that gives the plot momentum, whatever. Usually in movies like this, or most movies in general, the MacGuffin is almost like, I always, as a guy who likes plot and story, I get frustrated when the MacGuffin is just like, it's just a thing. Don't worry about it. It's the journey that matters. It's like, yeah, the journey matters, but I also think the payoff matters. And this is one of those rare films that when they actually get to Jotunheim, which is this big tower in this, I think it seems like it's a South American country. I didn't pay any attention to where these guys are. It's fucking awesome. Like, you know, they get into the tower and they discover what's happening in the tower, and it's like, okay, this is fucking cool. It's not like, oh, you know, it's like, oh, it's in a lot of these superhero movies, it's like, oh, you get to the bad guy and you discover, and it's like, oh, it's the Tesseract, and it's whatever, it'll destroy the world. It's like, how many of that this, they get to this fucking tower, which is a very cool location for lots of great set pieces, and it's just like, oh my God, there's this. He's in the comics. I remember reading about him when I was younger. Starro, who's the big bad guy, the kaiju in this movie, is a giant fucking starfish from outer space. And he's like as big as Godzilla or King Kong. And you're just like, wait, what? I didn't see any of this coming. You know, I didn't see the experiments coming that the Thinker is doing in this tower, which is just gory and cool as fuck. So the MacGuffin pays off. So many of the characters, the next thing is so many of the characters in this movie were just so great. The Idris Elba character, Deadsport, I was a really interesting, impressive acting technique or ability, because this is a guy who, he's the heartbeat of the movie really in a lot of ways, and he really doesn't offer any tells that he's going to come around. He really does seem like kind of a closed off guy, but he's still able in a couple of scenes to kind of really show that there's a human underneath all this, and it's really cool. And he's also just badass. The way he kills people is fucking badass. Polka Dot Man, whatever, man. He's a fucking nut job, and his powers are awesome, and they're violent as fuck. There's a running gag about his mother in the movie that at first when it started, I was like, this is kind of forced and kind of dumb. But they grab hold of it like a fucking junkyard dog, and they do not let go of it. And by the end, they're still doing it. And when they do it at the end, when they pay it off at the end, you're just like, oh my God, this is crazy. He is great. Amanda Waller, who's kind of the Viola Davis plays like the woman who's running this whole thing from the safety of her base. She was in the first one. They're great. The Thinker from Doctor Who, Capaldi, is great. Ratcatcher, Savant. Harley Quinn, I'm not one of these like, oh, I love Harley Quinn. She's fine. She's a little forced. She's fine. But in this movie, she's awesome. There's one particular sequence where they have her strung up and they're torturing her. And what's really cool about her, like she's very impressive with like her gun work and acrobatics and all this shit. But there's this one scene where they're torturing her, and they keep sticking her with this electric cattle prod, and I think she's like doing a rhyme or a song, and it's like, oh yeah, Harley Quinn's crazy, it hurts her. She's like, but she's still laughing and singing and stuff, and then she passes out. But all of that is the act. What you thought was, oh, she's crazy, that's her shtick. The minute she sees a moment that she can get out of her situation and kill people she doesn't like, there's this look she does where she's faking being passed out, and then she just looks up, and all the jokiness and the crazy accent and the sing-song, that's gone. She shows you the essence of Harley Quinn as a supervillain, and she just looks up and she goes to town murdering, and it is very cool and very impressive. So she is awesome. A lot of great scenes in this movie, a lot of great action scenes. There's a sequence where Harley Quinn dives into the starfish's eye, and the liquid, whatever it is, the shit that is in the eye, the liquid shit, just envelops her, and she's like swimming and floating in this fucking eyeball. And then all of the Ratcatcher sends rats into the eyeball, and you see the rats starting to chew on the veins in the eye, and it is the most surreal, weird shit. That giant tower in Jotunheim collapses, and it's filled with a giant tank of water that's burst. So the whole thing, how that tumbles over and the characters are still inside trying to get out. You know, there's a battle between Flag and Peacemaker, which is just a great, knockdown, drag out brawl. I mean, just on and on and on and on. And the gore was great. So I just love that aspect. The last thing I'll say about why I really love this movie and why I think it's sticking with me is the Suicide Squad is about something, right? And I don't require movies, especially superhero fun movies, to have messages and shit. But when it does, it's so much more satisfying in some ways. Like I left Avengers Endgame, just soaring because it was inspirational, and I loved these characters, and I loved how it wrapped up, and and I get that Civil War was about something, but this is subversive. This movie, this is a smarter movie. This is not a movie that really is like made by committee of like, we have to make these guys heroes and we have to make sure it's all rah rah at the end. You can kind of play around the edges. It's like, no, this feels more like an auteur movie, in a number of ways, but not the least of which is the fact that it deals with things like, America not having its hands clean, in terms of doing these experiments that they know is bad. They know are bad experiments and evil, but let's outsource those to other countries so we can still look like America, the beautiful, the free, right? It's kind of a cliche to say, and I'm not trying to be clever, but if you look at Amanda Waller, who's running this operation for the government, she's a bigger bad guy than any of the Suicide Squad, right? The Suicide Squad, yeah, some of them are murderers and terrible people, but ultimately it's fascinating that the very thing that, we need to fix things are the people that we consider disposable. Which is very similar to a lot of people, who go into the military, not because they necessarily want to serve their country, but because they don't have a lot of other options, and they're just chum for the system, right? This is about, it's not on the nose, but it deals with, the surface of American exceptionalism, and then the underbelly of that. Peacemaker is a guy who literally will kill anyone, do anything, harm anybody in order to get peace, right? I mean, it's so, you could write a college paper on this movie. It's about a lot of things, but it's all kind of into that focus of like, what does it really mean to be a country like America? So I loved it. I thought it was smart. I thought it was interesting. Here's some stuff I didn't like real quick if you're interested. This is nitpicky shit, though. It's totally nitpicky shit. It's valid, but it wasn't enough to sort of ding my enjoyment of the film. I thought some of the characters didn't work. Peacemaker doesn't work, and I think that's John Cena. I like John Cena. I like him in some movies. I like him as a wrestler. But this is a Mark Wahlberg character, right? You need somebody who does comedy better, who does that kind of not self-aware of what a egotistic asshole they're being. And I think John Cena is saying the lines correctly, and he's playing the character correctly, but there's just, it lacks that nuance and that kind of just barbed, balance where it's like it's a smart character, but it's also, he's a total fucking idiot, right? I think Wahlberg would have been much better. I think Cena was not the right guy for this role. King Shark and Weasel, they should have been the Groots of the movie. At least one of them should have been. King Shark was cool. None of these characters were bad. But you would think a giant fucking crazy shark would just steal the fucking movie every scene he's in. And he's good. He's fine. It's a cool character. But it's one of those things that you're like, what? We should be, I should want a Funko Pop at this point of King Shark. It should be like, that was the coolest fucking character. And it was just so predictable and one note, and it didn't really go anywhere, and he didn't look, you want those characters to look awful and evil, but also kind of adorable, and it didn't work. Nor did Weasel at the level that I think it should have. It should have been Groot, and it just was not. Spaghetti Method. I mean, look, this is a movie that throws a bunch of shit at the wall. The vast majority of it sticks. Some of it doesn't. None of it doesn't stick so poorly that it feels like it really fucks up the movie. Like, it's a funny movie. But there are some things that are clearly meant to be funny that don't totally land, but they don't land so poorly that it pulls you out of the film. It's just kind of like, whatever. So there's definitely, an unevenness. Here's what I'll say. When you have a movie that is inspired as this movie for the vast majority of it, the moments that clearly are not inspired, that you can kind of see Oz behind the curtain pulling the levers and shit, those stand out more. A good example for me are like at the very beginning of the movie, Savant runs away from the mission, and as you know, they put these little things in the Suicide Squad's head, so if they abandon the mission, they'll blow their heads off. So it's how they control them. Well, he's like, fucking, I'm out, and they blow his head off, and he's in the water. And his blood spills out of his head, and it kind of forms like Warner Brothers Presents, right? So the title sequence is kind of done in the world that they're in, and things. It's very, very cool. But that method carries over for the whole movie, right? So every 20, 30, 40 minutes, they're giving you a way that the environment is giving you kind of the comic book version thing of meanwhile, and then this happened or whatever. And sometimes it's like once you've seen it once, it starts to feel a little forced. And every now and then they're able to smarten it up. Like there was one scene where it's like next mission Jotunheim, and all that's in a big explosion with fire. And then I think it's Idris Elba who says, or Idris Elba, however you say his name, it says, oh, well, we have to go get Harley Quinn first. And suddenly the part of the fire that says Jotunheim extinguishes, and it rebrands itself, and it says next mission Harley Quinn. So they will play with it, but there's a number of times that it's just kind of, it falls flat. I know that sounds like a minor nitpick, and it is. But in a movie where most of the movie is really interesting and inspired and different and funny and fresh, the things that don't work stand out more. But overall, I absolutely love the movie. It's a real shame it's not doing any better at the box office. It kind of makes sense. It's a hard R-rated movie. I know there's the COVID stuff, but usually even with stuff like Wonder Woman 84, when it wasn't even in theaters. But when you have stuff like King Kong and stuff where you could go to a theater and see it, you would still have a balance where it's like Black Widow opened pretty well at 60 million, but it also made 60 million on Disney Plus. This is not just that, right? There's part of that, of course. COVID is to blame for sure, but there's also part, and they haven't released the figures. We'll get those tomorrow or today at this point of how much it did at home. But unless it was just like quadruple what it made in the theaters, it's clearly that this didn't connect the way it was expected to, especially for a beautifully reviewed movie, a wonderful movie, cost $185 million, hard R movie. I would love to see Warner Brothers do a PG-13 version of this movie and get it out very soon. I don't take this movie away, of course, but you could edit this so it doesn't have to be R. I think you could. And I think you would still have a very enjoyable movie that you could have a bigger audience appreciate this film. So I think it sucks that it's heading towards being looked at as a flop. Possibly, it really did not do well when it opened. So that sucks because it sure is great. I highly recommend it. It's on HBO Max now. I think it'll leave in about 3 weeks, and then whatever, you can get it, renting it or buying it or whatever. That's the Suicide Squad, baby. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. One of my favorite superhero movies I've ever seen. It's not the best. It's not Superman. It's not Avengers Endgame, but it's in the top. It's certainly in the top 10. It may be in the top 5. It is smart. It is interesting. It is different. It has its own unique heartbeat, and that says a lot in a genre that is crowded with wonderful movies, but they're very factory feeling. They feel like they've just come off the assembly line. This is really cool to watch a film like this. It feels like. It kind of feels like when you first discovered Garth Ennis as a comic book writer. You're like, okay, this is not how comic books are supposed to be written. Or Michael Bendis as a comic book writer. You're like, Jesus fucking Christ. There's a brain behind this. This is not design or writing by committee. This is pretty special. So I loved it, Suicide Squad. Hope you're well. Maybe I can go to bed now. See you soon. Bye.